Evening and welcome to day 2 of the Beaufort County Board of Education business meeting that began yesterday, June 29th, 2021. I would like to make a few comments before we get started tonight. Last night the internet was an issue, and we did have somebody submit a request for second public comments in a timely fashion, but we received it after the meeting ended, so we're going to have the second public comments person. We'll contact them before we begin where we left off last night, which would be at the beginning of the superintendent's report. We also have multiple unfinished executive session items that we'll go back into executive session as I stated last night prior to adjournment tonight and finish those items. I would also like to remind those that are participating in this meeting that the board adopted unanimously our coherent governance policy manual in February of this year. And I would like to read some of policy GC2 governing commitments to those that are participating. This is GC2, item 4. To ensure that the board's business meetings are conducted with maximum effectiveness and efficiency, speak only when recognized. Do not interrupt each other. Do not monopolize the discussion. Support the chair's efforts to facilitate an orderly meeting. Members will commit to holding meetings that are conducted with maximum efficiency and effectiveness. Make comments germane to the matter being actively discussed. The chair or presiding officer may interrupt a board member who comments on or moves from a topic not being discussed or debated, resulting in the cessation of that board member's comments. Allow board members who have not yet spoken on a topic being discussed or debated to comment. And the chair will give priority of comment to a member who has not yet spoken on the topic being discussed or debated. The equal participation of all members is valued. We also conduct our meetings in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, procedure in small boards. I believe that if members, staff continue to speak when they are not recognized, I think the best way for us to handle that will be to mute everyone. And then when someone is recognized, they will be unmuted. But we will not start that way tonight. That will be if as a last resort. The way a member will be recognized is I request that you raise your electronic hand rather than your arm or hand on your body, because when you raise your electronic hand, you are placed in order in the queue. And if you're raising your hand, motioning to me, whether on Zoom or in person, I have to remember where you are in that queue because you're not automatically put in that queue. And it puts a lot more burden on the presiding officer. So I will ask you to raise and lower your electronic hands. And if there's anybody who has an issue with that, please state that now. Everybody has an electronic hand. All right, so I think we're ready to get started.
Mr. Cook said he will not be available at 6 o'clock. How would you like to respond?
I'm sorry, who said they would? Oh, Mr. Cook? I've given him the opportunity. So how about he speak at our next meeting? Okay. So, do not have, once again, any second public comments. So we're down to the superintendent's report, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Dr. Gwatz. We'll begin this evening in goal number 1 under student achievement. and we're going to provide a priority schools update and a PSI school update. So, Dr. Stratos, are you ready?
It is called teamwork. So thank you very much, Mr. Fallon. Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. I do want to take the opportunity this evening to share update on our priority schools as identified by the state of South Carolina, as well as our ATSI schools. On your desk, you should have a white binder that will provide you the updated copy that has been updated into board docs. So going through this presentation, if you could refer to the PowerPoint presentation that is located in the white binder on your desk, I'd appreciate that. For those who are not with us here physically, we will have the updated presentation on the slides coming forward electronically as well. So once again, good evening, board members. I want to take this opportunity to introduce myself and Dr. Mary Stratos. With me is going to be Daniel Fallon. He is our Director of Data Services. At this time, I'm going to have Mr. Fallon give you a little bit of the who, what, where, and why of priority schools, as well as a little bit on the, starting with the data of our 2 priority schools. So Mr. Fallon.
Good evening. As Dr. Stratos said, I will be giving a little bit of background on the priority schools, just as a refresher. I know we're doing this quarterly, but it's nice to, for those at home or the public watching, just have a reminder as to what this is and why we're doing it. So Beaufort County School District has 2 priority schools.
Excuse me, we can't hear you.
Is that better?
So maybe just put your mouth
Okay,
closer.
that's fine. Yeah. So we have Hilton Head Middle School and we have Well Branch Middle School. Priority schools are identified, were identified off of the 2018 SC Ready data. And it was, these 2 schools fell in the bottom 10% on the South Carolina report card at that time. They were on a 3-year cycle for being a priority school. That would have put these schools on the potential of being removed from the priority list in the spring of 2020. That testing did not occur. So as a freeze to accountability for state and federal reasons, the freeze to assessments in spring of 2020, these schools are also frozen in their current status. So whether they are or are not, or could or should or would, does not matter. They are holding their rating for another year at least. And that is to be determined by the state and the feds as to the testing in 2021, if that is substantial enough to potentially move them off the list or at least go through 2022. So we will start with Hilton Head Island Middle School. We are presenting NWA MAP data, fall, winter, and spring, projected proficiency for reading and mathematics. We gave you all information, all subgroups. The subgroups are not necessarily pertinent to the priority schools, but they are for the ATSI schools. So we kept the data in the same format so you have all the information possible. Fall testing, if we remember, we started the school year virtually. These tests occurred more or less the entire month of September. We did take some students did take that during the ARC opportunities before school started. And then once we did come back, some students did come into campus, and we also did virtual testing for those first 3 weeks of school. So essentially the first month of September. The winter testing was the month of December, right before winter break. And then for these students, these are 3 through 8 students, we actually do the spring testing the 2 weeks prior to spring break to allow the schools to have 1 month of intensive instruction based on the data to push towards our state assessment. So those are the 3 data points in time. And then also to the methodology of the data, we pull the spring scores and then we match off of that school name, off of that grade level, off of the winter and the fall. So every time that we present this data to you, it is a realistic look of what the school would look like over the course of the year. An example in that, a student lives in the Buford Elementary School zone. for fall testing, winter testing. They transfer to Robert Smalls or they transfer to Joseph Shanklin. They take the test in the spring. I've captured that student in fall, winter, and spring in this for Joseph Shanklin. So it's a realistic look of how that student progressed through the year, whether they were at Joseph Shanklin or not. So now to get into the actual data. So pink, those are the females. Blue, those are males. You also see the F and the M at the end there, so for visual. All students. So the all students row represents all students in that school. In this case, it's grades 6 through 8. We have fall testing. We have does not meets expectations or projected to be does not meets expectations. Approaches expectations. And then the state expectation for meeting basically is meets expectations and exceeds expectations. We can see in those, each cell is the percent of students. In the parentheses is the N count or the sample size of that population. So Hilton Head Middle School, reading. If I start in the first cell, all students, and I look at the does not meet expectations for fall 2021, 26.4% of students were projected back in September to be not met on the reading state assessment given the last 25 to 30 days of the school year, and that represents 216 students. So for the flow of the presentation, I don't want to break the flow of the presentation, so I want to spend all the time now describing the data, and then I can answer any questions pertinent to the data, but it's going to be the similar message every single data slide. So happy to walk through this for understanding, to understand what it is telling us. But then really the meat of this presentation is what the schools have been doing and what their plans of actions are. The data is there to support or to tell the story. So if we go to slide 2, we look at mathematics, similar story, map data, projected proficiencies, male, females, fall, winter, spring. An example, all students there, 24.8% at Hilton Head Middle School in the fall, projected to be does not meets. Spring, 34.7, projected to be does not meets in the assessment that's coming roughly a month after that assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. And I do want us to recognize that our fall data for math was virtual. So originally during the academic school year, we shared with you that there were outside items that we weren't able to control regarding we don't know who may have provided some assistance with administration of the tests. So I want to share that as well. So we go back forward to the next slide so we can share some information specifically, let's say for Hilton Head Middle School. What we've asked the schools to do is put information together for next year, put information together for what they've done this year, and a reflection slide. So that will be the order that you will see in this presentation. So with Hilton Head Middle School, I'd like to share in the upcoming academic school year, they'll be focused on Tier 3 students, 70% of the students in iReady reading support classes who met typical growth targets, and 55% of students in reading math met their growth targets. So what they're trying to say is celebrating what we've done in the past. Well, they are going to continue the MTSS model for providing additional support for academic needs of students. They will focus with the tiered model for Tier 2. Focus will also for the academic school year will be upon our multilingual students with iLit. And as I shared with you last night, we also have Imagine Learning for our newcomers and our level 1 language students, or MLs. And each of the above programmatic models that they had success with students this current year, they will be continuing in the upcoming year. If we look at some of the accomplishments on slide 6, Hilton Head Island Middle School put work together in an anthology book. It was supported by the Rotary and Interact clubs. The work of Hilton Head Island Middle School students, artists, poets were selected for publication. This publication is available. It is a book for sale within the island of Hilton Head. Induction of 35 students into the National Junior Honor Society. Also this year, 25 students were published in the River of Words publication. We made note of that last night with a young lady who received the cover of the River of Words. We also, the Art League of Hilton Head will host an art show of paintings entitled In Pursuit of Freedom and Opportunity. They had 15 junior scholars this year, and band and orchestra was able to perform for winter and spring concerts. Their big reflection for this year, and you're going to see a continual theme. Perseverance is a word that comes out in our first bullet. Focus upon school climate reflected high student engagement for excitement in looking into the 2021-2022 academic year. You're going to hear the word of normalcy and excitement, looking forward to going back to what we were able to do in the past, coming out of these reflection slides amongst all of our schools. And I think one of the biggest items to pull forward is the last bullet here for Hilton Head Middle, that our school community is surrounded by wonderful, supportive personnel, making note of from the bus drivers, cafeteria workers, school counselors, school social workers, the behavior management specialists, and interventionists, to classified staff and assistants with district staff who helped during this academic school year. I also want to take a point for reflection for this year. Ms. Pat Frieda, this was her last active day on the campus. So we do recognize her hard work over the years. So I do want to share that in the point of reflection because she's a wonderful school leader, wonderful educator. As we turn the page to Whale Branch Middle School. Mr. Fallon, is anything you'd like to share or with the data? Please.
So as we recall in the data, it says, I don't want to just talk just about Whale Branch Middle, but in the fall, in the winter, when I think Dr. Bradley, Dr. Rodriguez, and myself, we all shared the Education Oversight Committee analysis on South Carolina students based on our interim assessments. 70% of students impacted by COVID, they weren't going to meet. So I just wanted to bring that to, I was neglected to do that at the beginning slide. So 70% of South Carolina students were projected to not meet proficiency due to COVID, the impact of COVID. So remember that when we're looking at the data as well. It is an impacted year. Not only are these schools already fragile as being their rating, but also we're coming off of the COVID pandemic. So that has some impact on their data as well. Are there questions about the Whale Branch? The understanding of the data. It's pretty.
Mr. Richard Geyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things you didn't mention is what is the ratio of people that were tested, first of all, in the fall. That testing, you said it was done virtually, correct? That winter and the spring were done in person for everyone, including those that were virtual students?
There was far less virtual testing in winter and even less in spring, but we still had virtual assessments in spring.
Okay, but they took it virtually, or they took it in?
Some took it virtually. NWA allows us to take the test virtually. All state assessments have to be done in person.
Okay, and
Before you
what-
go on, can you please put your
Yeah,
mouth
sure,
closer,
sorry.
or maybe take that out of there?
Okay, and what have you done any look at the data on what the students that transition to face-to-face and hybrid versus the ones that stayed virtual? Have you broken the data out by that to see what difference that we had between the hybrid and the, for example, in the Whale Branch, when I've looked at statistics, they had a large number of kids that stayed virtual the entire year. So have you broken that difference out, that variable out?
So one thing, the only data points that we could actually do, because remember we were virtual for the first weeks, and then everyone was hybrid through.
No, not everybody.
Well, true, not everyone. But then we went to hybrid, and then we came back face to face, and we still had the virtuals. So as Dr. Stratus said, I don't like to bring it up too much, but there's uncontrolled fall testing. So the baseline fall testing gives us some concern on doing any kind of deep analysis. We can look fall to spring a little. We can look winter to spring a little. We're really waiting on the state assessments to be finalized and for that data to come in, because that's the meaningful piece. Then we can look at who was virtual, who was face to face. who attendance wise, we can look at that and actually get the real meat of what happened. So we're looking at the SC Ready, SC Pass EOCs.
Patricia Fidrich?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Daniel, I was so busy looking at the numbers and everything. If you go back to page 3, the first slide with the data on it from Hilton Head, can you just explain the difference? The first row is all students and the last row is all students.
The all students looks like it's captured from alphabetically what would come after Hilton Head Middle, probably Hilton Head Island School for Creative Arts. That's just a capture from a different. That's not Hilton Head Middle.
Okay, so it's
Yep.
it's the top.
That's the top
row.
line of the
Got
next
it.
school.
Got
Yes, ma'am.
it. Okay, thank you.
Melvin Campbell?
Then you mentioned that 70% of prediction of students not meeting proficiency by the state. What's the usual number?
The usual number, the last data we would have would have been 2019.
Was-
And I don't have that in my Rolodex in my brain.
Yeah, man.
I wish I could tell you the all student, but every grade level is a little different. I just don't have the all student committed to memory. But normally, we are in the 50% range, 40 to, depending on the grade level and subject, the 40 to 45, somewhat a little bit higher when we're looking at meets and exceeds.
Not meeting proficiency.
40 to 50%, I'm talking meets and exceeds. So, roughly looking at probably a 40% not meets. So it's got roughly a 30% probably impact that we would do deemed on COVID.
Asking 70%, and we're using 47%. That 70% doesn't mean we're going to get it.
True. Yeah. Until the scores are finalized, we don't know. Yeah, the impact. But that is all of our data coming in from NWA and the other interim assessments, and their projected probability projections on our state assessments.
Ms. Ingrid Boatwright?
Thank you. So I was frantically doing a couple of calculations because when you look at this data, I'm looking at the math data for Hilton Head. Does not meet expectation for all students, went from 203 to 298, which is like a 46% increase, which, I think makes sense given what we're already talking about. But I kind of toyed with the numbers for just a second. It looks like we had an increase of 59 kids between the fall, just in terms of enrollment. And that they all basically, if I'm doing my math right, they all fell into the does not meet expectations. That's a 5% increase in enrollment. That's probably atypical, I would think, right?
Well, you have to think of the enrollment through the process we started virtually.
Yeah.
And we did lose a lot of students to what we would deem local options.
You think they all came back in the
When
spring?
we made the announcement that we were coming back face to face, we did see re-enrollments of students coming back.
Okay. Because that's something I'd like to explore a little bit, because it does look like the ones that came back all were do not meet expectations.
Now, we can't imply that.
I know it's not
that's
implied, but the
totally-
numbers match up nicely for
Yeah.
me, just, doing my little calculations.
yeah.
So it's just from an enrollment trend, I think it makes the data a little bit, hard to read, obviously, because a 50% increase and does not meet expectations is alarming, but we had total number of students increase by, a large number. So I think that there's some interesting data here on enrollment trends also.
And Mrs. Boatwright, what you speak to also lends to the support that we had discussion that students need to be in it to win it to be back in school. So yes. So if we can continue looking at Whale Branch Middle School slide. Yes, ma'am.
We still have another
I do
board
apologize.
member, William
Yes, ma'am.
Smith.
In terms of, do we have the rankings of our schools in terms of the district and as well as South Carolina? That's encompasses this document as well, this update?
Mr. Smith, the NWEA data, we do not have the capability of doing comparative analysis to other districts. When our SC Ready reading and math, as well as our EOC data is released and unembargoed, then we'll be able to compare ourselves to others. Right now, we're in the status of comparing ourselves to ourselves on projected proficiency.
right? But in terms of scores into where the schools are, I'm sure that we still rank. We still fall under some type of rank, don't we?
I understand where you're driving, sir. Because this presentation is tied to the priority and ATSI schools, we did not provide a ranking for this time and place with this presentation, sir.
Okay. Okay. In the future, can you also update us with that information as well?
Yes, sir. We'll be very pleased to do that.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate it. Thank you.
So please continue.
Thank you, ma'am. So we proceed to slide 11. Slide 11 will give you a brief targeted areas for Whale Branch Middle School for academic performance and goals. They are looking at a focus of history and the culture of the Whale Branch area. If you do not know, Whale Branch in the back of the school area is built on historic ruins, and it is an opportunity that they have done archaeological digs in the back, which I think is phenomenal. So we do want to raise an awareness of our students of who and where we are, and that is the intent with the principal there when this was put forward. School creed is basically used as an expectation. Basically, it's a mantra, who we are, our expectations, and in order to be able to succeed, rather than being punitive, let's build hope and remind our young men and women of their accomplishments and a direction to go forward in. Creation of a parent night, what is being referred to as Middle School 101, as a tool to increase parent and community involvement. Embedding an integrated model of reading, writing, and research across the curriculum. This way our students can help develop the why and understanding what they are studying. Regular monitoring of student progress during data meetings, or what we also refer to as professional learning communities, PLCs. Use of common academic language and performance-based learning objectives as a method of increasing targeted student learning. In other words, common language across the board. So when we say sum, it means this equals 2. We don't jump from sum to total, give me the answer. Commonality at language so our kids are not confused. And the language is based on the higher use words from standardized testing. Targeted use of scholastic literacy. They have utilized it this past academic year on their own with special funding. It will remain within the 5th and 6th grade. Reading Plus to improve student fluency of reading in grades 6 through 8. And iReady, which has been used throughout the district as well as with students with disabilities, and is also an intervention MTSS instructional tool used for our school. I do want to bring forward that Reading Plus, one item that we may not have brought forward enough last night, is that reading following Reading with the Light. You also have the opportunity at Reading to bring in your margins smaller, so a student who really is jumping around, they're able to keep a closer clue at reading. So I'd like to bring that forward because sometimes that is one of the issues with our students, and it does help reform the auricular muscles in the eye. Well, basically, we're reforming your eyes and how to read properly, if that makes sense. So some of the accomplishments, if we look for Whale Branch Middle, slide 12. They worked hard at providing technology and hotspots for students. By the end of the academic school year, 80% of the top 10 students graduating from Whale Branch Early College actually attended Whale Branch Middle. Improvement upon fidelity of MTSS practices to better meet the needs of students. They started a garden to home program that distributed fruits and vegetables to the local families. This is not the only school you'll see within this academic school year who has started this. We have other schools in the district as well. Work with a consultant to assist with the implementation. Focus upon literacy. I shared the name of the consultant who they've been working with. And Reading Across America Month targeted aspiring writers with author Kawani Alexander. If we look at the reflection on slide 13, upon reflection of the 2020-2021 school year, we determined the importance of providing opportunities to build teacher capacity. Teacher-family relationships is paramount. Building on this is our continued focus of pulling from the past into the present in order to build upon the future of the community. And I have a strong feeling that Mr. Lawton took that from a prior Heritage Festival, so I gave him some kudos on that when I had the conversation with him. As we go forward, we have Beaufort Elementary. ATSI School. Would you like to give a definition of that?
So as we transition from priority schools, which is the bottom, those schools fall in the bottom 10% based on the rating on the 2018 data. ATSI schools are on the list because they have one or more subgroups that are historically underperforming. And the true definition is once the schools are ordered in the priority, the CSI, all the rankings, in this case, Beaufort Elementary School would be compared to all the elementary schools in the state. If any of their subgroup performance is below the school at the 10th percentile, basically saying the top performing CSI or truly targeted support schools, that subgroup would qualify that school to be an ATSI. In Beaufort County, based on our current data, all of our ATSI schools are on the list because of the students with disabilities population. So the commonality is all students with disabilities are the only reason our schools are on the ATSI. Any one of these, and we could even expand it to a migrant, if we had a migrant population large enough, could put us on the list. Male, female could actually do that. MLs, any ethnic distribution, whether it be Asian American, Indian, Caucasian, African American, all of those are areas in which a school could be an ATSI school.
Any questions regarding the classification? If we go to slide 17, I'm not going to stand here and read everything to you. I would like an opportunity just to give some quick highlights and points. If we look at Beaufort Elementary School, some of the areas that they're focused for our students with disability would be highlighted in the last bullet with regard to their instructional plan for the upcoming school year. Implementation of Ortham Gillingham, where this total this year, by the end of July, we will have approximately 135 teachers trained in OG, meaning the Ortham Gillingham reading. We will have 5 teachers within the school district qualified to be trained the trainer model, so we will not be going out to consultant services. Response to intervention is a big focus area in order to help develop and target student learning, not only during the instructional day, and speaking with the principal, the goal was also in after school, our 2.0 program for the upcoming year. Literacy, LLI, and again, working with Dr. Danielle D. Dickey, who has been working with a few schools here in the county with regard to that commonality of language, commonality of standards, and really helping to understand what does the standard say, what is the language tied to the standard. A lot of his work is tied to vocabulary in the content areas. He focuses predominantly in social studies and on science. And if you read into the research, it does show those are the 2 growth areas in a content area to build literacy within students. The next slide very quickly speaks for itself. I do have to brag that Beaufort Elementary School has received Cognia recertification for STEM. It was not easy. There are a few of the schools in the county who are going through that. I do want to highlight that. If you look close to the picture on the side, there may be some familiar faces of personnel who were here last night speaking as well. And if you look in the bottom, you see some pictures of our wonderful students. They were able to continue building community, and I think I wanted to highlight that for the school. Reflection. We will go to the last bullet just to keep an eye. With regard to the Upbeat survey indicated a need to improve professional development, where 92% of those surveyed feel satisfied and that they have a purpose in their school workplace. So the principal at the time of this writing had been significant conversation to rebuilding the school renewal plan with a greater focus on professional development, or as I'd like to share, human capacity of their educators. So we will go now to Broad River Elementary. I'll give you a moment to review the data for reading, as well as the data for math. I do want to make point again, please recognize that these are projections. And we will be very happy once we have data that is unembargoed to give that information and share, and in a rank order as Mr. Smith had requested. With that, I'd like us to go to slide 23. Looking forward into the upcoming academic school year, principal of Broad River Elementary is focusing to continue with current literacy plan, focus upon a gradual release model built upon differentiated instruction at tier 1 and small group instruction. I want to make highlight there because that is where differentiation should take. It should be the classroom teacher is the paramount person first, and then you continue with other interventions. The school has taken that on school-wide, which was a shift in the culture and practice. Second bullet shares that they want to maintain an instructional learning with fidelity of practice and focus upon differentiation of learning needs and academic success. On the bottom of that one book, that was a school-wide read. They conducted a book study, and they wanted to highlight that they were one of the schools that we did pilot scholastic literacy this past academic school year. Accomplishments are identified on page 24. There was a shift of mindset from a prior presentation where there was commentary of that we didn't have that confidence to go back into the building. That shifted over the shift from winter through spring on that campus. 75% of the students were able to return to school face-to-face. Student achievement data is continuing to improve, and this is an internal observation with their common assessments that they were utilizing through Scholastic. And I do like to just put the human touch there that it says our babies are safe, happy learning, and they just can't hide their starfish pride. On page 25, I think the key word to see on their reflection is resilience. This has been a difficult year, not only for children, but also the educators and school leaders. We recognize that nationally there's 7 out of 10, where they say students will not meet the mark of proficiency. So I need you to think about how that not only for yourself as school board members, how is that for that educator in front recognizing the gaps that we have. So resiliency is what we need. We need to have to be malleable, to go forward and to build on success and to reach excellence. I'd like us to go to Joseph Shanklin, please. Thank you, Mrs. Cushenberry. So we go to slide 27, we'll have reading. Joseph Shanklin Elementary, we know, is led by Miss Elizabeth Rivera. She is one of our newer principals. We do take to as a wonderful leader as well, as each one of these leaders are that I presented to you this evening. We proceed to page 28. And if we turn to the growth with a 29, on page 29, we do recognize that our goal is pushing our students with disabilities at each one of our ATSI schools, but we want you to recognize also a school-wide effect emphasis on student learning. A majority of our students with an IEP are actually in the mainstream classrooms. So we're building learning, we are building learning for all. They have mapped out the upcoming course to include prescriptive tutoring for students, not identified at grade level. You could see some of the tools that they would like to use. Dreambox was part of a pilot in some of our schools at the middle school. It was given to us by the state of South Carolina last year. Utilizing of an instructional assistant for targeted students within the Learning Lab, provision for students to receive additional math support with highly qualified teachers, school-wide SIOP training, building that capacity of best practices, and then that's predominantly SIOP is used for multilinguals, but there's a big philosophy in our county, not only at our targeted schools or partnering schools, and we'll talk about that later, is actually using best strategies with all our teachers and having all our teachers trained in the area of best practice for multilingual. And regular monitoring of student common assessment data. Again, a common theme. If you see it makes note of professional learning communities being utilized. We see the accomplishments on page 30, where it's specifically sharing that our students with disabilities assistant worked with in-person and virtual students daily. 71% of the students that worked with her showed growth on MAP reading, while 65% showed growth in MAP math. Math interventionists, if you go to the inside bullet, it shows 94% of the students that worked with her showed growth at math map. So we're recognizing that smaller groups do make a difference for student learning. Leader in Me, Lighthouse, recertified, and increase in parent and community support for student recognition events. I have to share in conversation with many principals, that is one of the most positive things that happened with COVID, is Zoom. The increase of parental involvement has been off the charts for many of our schools. And then we had to slow down because it was my excitement, because I've sat in a few of these meetings. It's been phenomenal to turn out. If we look at page 31, again, another one of our schools creating a garden. This is a special education teacher who did receive a grant. It is not the one that you see the butterfly garden in the center of the campus. It is actually one off to the side when you do visit Joseph Shanklin. Reflection, the 2021 school year has truly shown the dedication of the entire staff regarding the well-being, academically and emotionally, of the student body. Joseph Shanklin's staff is looking forward to some normalcy. I used that word earlier with you, and again, it is a common theme amongst the schools. If we could go to Okatee Elementary. Slide 34, if you want to pause to take a moment to review data. I need to share that prior to COVID, Okatee Elementary was one of our schools that had significant growth and with our students with disabilities. They would have probably been off the ATSI list. COVID came in, so financially it has actually been to their advantage, because while you are on the identified state list, there's also special funding that the schools use, and they're being utilized wisely. So if you want to turn the lemons into lemonade, this principal and the following principal are definitely taking an opportunity to say, hey, I'm okay with this. Let's keep helping our children. Page 35 will have our math information, projected proficiency. And on page 36, I'd like to make note to the first bullet there. This is a growing trend that we have asked and worked with top district leadership through Dr. Bradley and Dr. Rodriguez, asking for being able to identify a greater amount of our students in higher level or accelerated classwork. It is not just recognized at Okatee. It is being conducted at Beaufort L, Mossy Oaks, and Bluffton Elementary as well. And I'll throw a pitch, so is Pritchardville. It is becoming a trend that we are looking at our talented kids younger, trying to pull them up. So I'd like to make note of that. Commonalities, professional learning communities, STEM, another school that completed cognitive recertification. So we do recognize that we're seeing fidelity of practices goals for the upcoming school year, going towards STEM recertification, and the embedding of PLCs are common themes. The accomplishments are very much highlighted on page 37. I cannot resist the ukulele grant. If you take a quick look at the top picture, one of our owls of Okatee. And this was a grant by the music teacher. You will also notice more and more involvement of the fine and performing arts in our schools. It's a way of bringing our kids back. Also a way for our children to express themselves. Another school with a garden, and I have to coin the phrase living science through the garden club. On the reflection of page 38, again, looking at some past data, we did have a district-wide administration upbeat survey. The principals have taken them very closely and looked at the information, actually made data teams to get points for the upcoming academic school year. Okatee is not alone. Many of the schools have done this. Final bullet does share with you that they had 88% of their students attending face-to-face by the end of the academic school year, and less than 60 of the students remained virtual. Pritchardville Elementary School, thank you. We will turn quickly to page 40. Again, as noted earlier, another school that would have been able to work itself off of the state identifying list. I do see that they probably will either, if they use data this year at the state or the federal level, or the upcoming year. But I think many of our schools are going to work their ways off of this identifying list. If I go to page 42, I apologize. Thank you. On the top, key to efficacy of practice. I thought a picture was worth 1,000 words in working with Ms. Brenda Blue. So if you look to the item to the left, commonality of themes. All students are educated in the general education classroom. This is our students with an IEP. To the greatest extent appropriate, expectations are high. Instruction is standard based. The curriculum is the general curriculum, our standards. Individualized support are available when needed. Decisions are made on the basis and the needs of students. Another school who's embedded PLC practice, and if you look to the far side onto where it has the puzzle, it identifies embedding of systems, instruction, staffing, and having a collaborative model helps drive student success. On page 43, one item you will see, and you'll see more growth in the area in the county this coming year, is the Stetson model for students with disabilities. What that is actually training. I've mentioned it before. They have continued strong at Pritchardville for using an inclusion model with support facilitators. It is referred to as the Stetson model. Page 44 identifies their accomplishments. I'd like to highlight the second bullet, the language of the double power up, where they were taking students and building on additional literacy in their science and social studies blocks, utilizing content from both those disciplines. Page 44 will give you a reflection. And with that, I'll turn to our final school, Whale Branch Elementary. Page 47 and 48 will identify data associated with both the schools, reading and math respectively. And on page 49 is a footprint for academic strategy for the upcoming school year. All students means all. Students on campus face-to-face with high quality instruction. High quality instruction for all students through monitoring of learning expectations. Provide additional interventions, tutoring, and support during the school day to meet individual student needs. Professional development to increase teacher and staff awareness of student academic and social emotional needs. Embedding of the Jacob's Ladder professional development for instructional staff to promote higher order thinking. I have to share that Whale Branch Elementary as well as Whale Branch Middle are two schools that we are having discussion about actually utilizing a gifted and talented training for all teachers. Same way with SIA, well, GT talent training is also good for all teachers. If we go to page 50, we could see some accomplishments identified. I'd like to make note on that last bullet on that page on the teachers being noted of mentors of the month, because that is beyond their normal duty, and I have to say thank you. Our last item on this presentation is a reflection. Ongoing question to ask as a school leadership. Are we doing all that we can to meet their needs? The need to provide access to testing whereby the district provided where we provided transportation to help the school. COVID brought many challenges, and by not forgetting our why, we can do anything. And teaching and learning are our goals, and now is the time to regroup, reflect, and we prepare ourselves to address the needs of our students and their learning, regardless of anything, and I have to put that out there. And it is one student at a time. Let's all make a difference. So that is a quick update. I do apologize. 51 slides. but I had to give every school the opportunity. So we have any questions?
Mr. Guyer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing that's been very important to, at least I know the schools, Broad River and Shanklin, is the pandemic stopped volunteers from the community from coming in. I'm hoping that in the fall, we can re-energize them, that they're constantly talking to me about when can we get back? When can we get in the schools? So I'm hoping there's a good outreach for volunteers. Second thing from looking at this data is we have a real low base, Dr. Rodriguez. And I expect a steep curve coming up. When you have a low base, we're not going to dip down. You don't expect a gradual. We're going to have upward slope on our scores and projections. And I think you have the plan to do that, but I just want to make sure, at least my expectations are significant test score improvements. Probably not in the fall, but certainly by the winter and spring, especially the spring, that we can see some phenomenal improvement. So good luck. I want you to give you all the support we can give you.
Mr. Mel Kimball?
My question is, what are the expectations of the new student here when the year starts? Are they going to be given this data and expected to address it? Is there articulation between last year's teacher and student? And because I don't know, I'm seeing and hearing all the things in place that should produce some progress, some kind of growth, but there must be some missing links. You know, there must be something missing that we are not doing to drive these levels, the differences from one year. This tells us a lot, but it doesn't tell us anything compared to what the first year of COVID and how the teachers tested. I know COVID was not an aberration, but the question I'm asking, is there discussion of data between 6th grade teacher and 7th grade teacher of Pacific students? You know, I can see students getting lost when we just doing basic in terms of window work and looking at the maps, looking at what happened between fall and the spring. And then next year, fall, it's a new student to a new set of teachers. And that's where I think would be something unintended.
Madam Chair, may I? So this is going to be a two-person response, Mr. Campbell. I always consider myself rather proficient with performance matters until I met a challenge standing to my left. So for anything that I thought I was able to do, Mr. Fallon has always been able to take it one step further, as well as our superintendent, who's very proficient at PM, performance matters. So let me share one of the qualities of performance matters, that it allows itself to be a repository of historical data. So myself as an educator, I'm going to be able to go in, pull up my class roster, and I'll be able to look and click and get information. But I will let Mr. Fallon be able to even go further at that, because that is a very necessary tool, what you're just bringing forward, to say, I need to know where my kids are in order to know where I'm going. The second part that before I have Mr. Fallon speak to performance matters is the onboarding of educators. We have had educators this past year utilizing some of the tools that we brought forward. We are going to be conducting a very strong PD for the new educators as well. We've been able to obtain, as we go forward with onboarding other instructional software and professional development, those contracts that we want concierge service for us, our school district. So that is one of the guidelines that I am putting forward. But if I could have Mr. Fallon speak a little more on what performance matters can give a teacher to also get historical data.
So one of the themes we heard in all the reflections is PLCs, professional learning communities. So with that week of in-service at teachers, schedules are all built. Performance Matters actually rolls over tonight into the new school year. Power School rolls over Friday into the new school year. As soon as schools build the schedules, Performance Matters, Enrich, NWA, Power School are all available. So they can start
We can't hear you again.
now. So they have that power electronically, but it goes back to the power of the PLC. So in a PLC, a teacher will be able to pull up Performance Matters before any interims are given, before fall map is given, and see the past performance for 4 to 6 years, depending on the assessment of the students that are coming into their classroom. Tie that in with behavior, discipline, attendance, classroom grades, all on one report. So you can see if there are any anomalies. You can see if this is a trend over time that a student might not be performing where they want them to, and there's a historical trend of that. Or the why. They missed 20 days of school last year. Or they were fully virtual and we don't know if they were fully engaged. So Performance Matters just doesn't give us, because I remember, Test View gave us tests. Performance Matters brings in so much more from Power School that you don't have to go to 2 systems. It pulls from the gradebook, it pulls from Power School schedule, it pulls from attendance behavior, and it's all there. So that's what we're rolling out with, I know the technology coaches, we're gonna roll out through professional development to make everyone proficient. And then in the meantime, we'll pre-front the system with reports that you go in, click a link, it tells me what we know you need to know.
We have quite a few hands up. Move on and we can come back if we. Okay, Ms. Fidrich.
Thank you, Dr. Glatz. Mine is more of a comment than a question. And Dr. Stratos and Mr. Fallon, thank you very much for this information. And over the past couple months, as you have presented to us some of the instructional initiatives, some of the HR, personnel initiatives, and so on, and then looking at this data, I can see that the picture is building. We see the data, we see the need. We see the need to have a steep increase at this time next year, that the data is going to show us that there's been some, but that doesn't happen. But when you spoke to us last night about Reading Plus, you'll be speaking to us about some other initiatives. Dr. Rodriguez, you have talked about targeting teachers in specific schools. I know that there was a recent assistant principal professional development going on. I see all the different pieces all coming together to help us get there. And I feel very encouraged. It's as if you see all the different, what used to be silos are working together. HR supporting the instruction, operations supporting how the capacity and the program capacity, the referendum, the community, it just all the pieces are coming together. And I'm very excited. And I just want to say thank you. I am going to share this with my constituents, spread the word that it's not just instruction, it's not just operations referendum, it's not just getting more teachers, there's a plan. There's a plan. So, thank you.
Earl Campbell.
Yes. When I look at Well Branch, I have to go back several years when my grandson and granddaughter was in those schools. And we had 2 principals, Mr. Don Doggett and Mona Lisa Dixon. And these children can learn, but we need to have teachers and leaders in those schools make sure that happens. I think what we need to do is focus more on reading and math. I know you talked about 90 minutes for reading, but I think we need to do same thing for math. If we can get those two items and get the students involved in those, I think you will see a lot of growth. Hey, thank you.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I was just going to comment on part of what Mr. Campbell was talking about too, which is that because I think what he's referring to is the data is good and it's important, but he's also referring to like a handoff between third grade and fourth grade, right, of the individual students. So in some schools do looping, right, where that teacher moves forward with. So in that sense, in those cases, right, that handoff is there's no handoff, right? They had the same student. But in some other cases where, or in probably most other cases where that handoff isn't there, that is the kind of thing that we're going to be expecting happens in the first sort of week of school or preschool, where they have an opportunity to dialogue, review their information, review their data, and then have an opportunity to engage with a prior year teacher for a student, because you're referring to some anecdotal information that maybe data doesn't capture. Okay.
Yep. All right, we're back. We're back to you, Mr. Campbell, Mel Campbell.
Yeah, I exactly what I'm saying, Doc. I'm saying that, and the tools are there. You got everything in place, but I mean, that doesn't really make the performance change unless you got everybody in for buy-in and understand how to maximize the use of those tools. I mean, if teachers don't ever look at what performance matters, what performance matters, they don't ever look at it, then you got a useless tool there in terms of what we expecting, right? We're expecting them to look at it and bet that student almost entirely and communicate with last year's teacher for what they see. And that requires a lot of culture building, communication. I mean, those PLCs can't be driven by someone who doesn't understand that got a one-year teacher that doesn't have a clue what performance matters is. So that's the kind of thing I'm urging us to really look at a little bit further in terms of, the execution. Plans are in place, all of the components are in place. Now, the execution, and this is point here. I mean, everything looks great. Like I said before, a lot of good-looking things in my lifetime. If there's not a team at that school that's building on it, it's not happening. So I'm hoping that everybody's, going to be on page.
Mr. William Smith?
I am in 100% in agreement with what Mr. Mel Campbell have just said. Along with one of the components, I think that go along with this is culture. I think that I know in the African American community that you have to have kids you have to have a staff members who understand the kids and understand the community. That I think that is one thing that we have to understand, because years ago there was a principal when I was in school of Dr. Davis, and Dr. Davis was very strategic about her movement and how she moved our test scores and what she did with students. And everything that she has to do in school, we knew that if we perform better on our tests, if we score differently, that not only was there reward, but she trained us to where it made us feel different. And also in saying that, I think that in some schools that we, my constituents have said to me that we need more African American people for the kids to relate to and also to look up to. And I know we have talked about that as a district, but I think that is something that we have to work towards. Have a stronger. That's something else that we need to focus on as well as also how we have different liaisons. I think that we may also need. We may need more parent liaison in some of these schools to get with these parents and to get the community more involved, so that we can get the community to buy in and understand how important it is for us to get our kids to the next level. So those are just some of the things that I think that can help these schools come up to par and help our schools to be more successful. And looking at it, because looking at this information, it is kind of it's a little difficult. Thank you.
So first, I just want to thank both of you, and I have a couple comments or questions. So as you mentioned and have mentioned previously, the TSI schools are all in this category because of the subcategory of students with disabilities being in the bottom or below, I think you said the 10th percentile of all the schools in the state. Right.
Schools
So,
overall, yes.
Yeah. So, like I assume, students, for example, with dyslexia would be in that group, or that are getting speech therapy and things like that. Probably your biggest group are probably kids in speech therapy. And how many of these students move out of that disability category as time goes on? It seems like that would, can you just touch on the students with disabilities? And obviously you're not going to be identifying, we don't want to have you give any information that would potentially identify a child, but just could you comment on that?
So a subgroup is 30. So a school has to have a subgroup of 30 students. You are on the right track with students, speech students being the most numerous at elementary. I can speak to this my dad's speech language pathologist, so I can speak to this holistically. As those students progress, they are discharged from service. Once they get to middle school, you have fewer speech students. At that point, you're getting a predominantly more SLD, or specific learning disability. So they're going to have a disability maybe in written expression or math computation. So it's a very, very identified disability. All of those students, yes, the students that have an IEP that are listed as needing an alternative or an alt assessment are also included on this because their assessment is scaled to SC ready. So all students that take and participate in testing are in that subgroup. Where we had SC pass, or even before that PACT, the SC alt assessment was not calculated in federal accountability. So all students, speech all the way through a traumatic brain injury that take assessments are in this data, correct. I do not track the discharging or discontinuation of services, but that could be done through analysis of their IEPs.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Also, I would like to thank you both for this presentation as well. But I did have one more question. Also, in one cluster, did I hear that y'all said that y'all were going to train all those staffs for GT students?
So, Mr. Smith, you did hear, so we have 2 schools in the Whale Branch cluster, and we'd like that both principals at the time, and we're seeking to continue this initiative, would like to have their teachers trained in the strategies for gifted and talented. One of the instructional tools we were looking at integrating, and we'll probably continue to integrate at Whale Branch Elementary, is Jacob's Ladder, which is literacy has to read, but it is a strategy based on higher order questioning for our students. So we'd like to build that capacity of our teachers at some of our schools, not just at the gifted and talented schools or programs. I think that's a better way of saying it.
Yeah, so all schools don't have gifted and talented teachers?
Yes, they do, sir. All schools do have GT, but we'd like to train all our teachers within that school site with the same strategies, not just for room 101. I think we should have teachers trained in room 101, 102, 204 respectively. So we're looking to do the same type of training for all teachers, or I think a better term to use is cross-training, so that we all have the same type of skill set, or at least the same type of bag of tricks or strategies that we could use with our students.
Thank you.
Dr.
And when you said 101,
Smith?
could you? Oh,
Mr.
I didn't hear.
Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, it's time. You've already asked a couple questions, so we're going to go
Oh,
on
no
to the
problem.
next person.
No problem.
And Dr. Wisniewski has not spoken, so it is her turn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fallon, did I hear you say that we don't track students as they, I guess, test out or whatnot of having an IEP, or we do track that?
No. That data is tracked. I don't personally in our department. We don't track that. We have a special education department that they track all these students. Just my department does not do that. So
I really can't hear him.
I don't have the data to be able to respond to that to know what that would look like. And
Okay.
no, they are tracked. Yes.
Yeah, because I do think, to Dr. Guadz's point about that information, I think it would be important for us to perhaps look at that or get a 10,000-foot view of what that's looked like over time, especially as it affects these schools and their statuses. And I know that obviously not all students would test out, but I think that that's something that we need to look at as a board, to see the efficiency and to track the progress that is going on in those departments. So if that is something that could go to the academic committee and then come to the board, I don't know, but I just wanted to reiterate that I think that's an important data point that we should look at. Thank you.
Ms. Bidrich?
Thank you. As you mentioned, those GT strategies are good for every student, just as PSYOP strategies are good for every student. And so could you just tell me, maybe think about when Dr. Gwadz brought up students with learning disabilities, and underneath students with learning disabilities and reading could be fluency, comprehension, dyslexia, any of those types of things. We know that we've seen some progress in reading in our schools that are using Orton, Gillingham, and Wilson. Did you say that we're going to have up to 150 teachers that are going to be qualified in Orton, Gillingham, or Wilson by the end of this next school year?
We'll have 135 teachers by the end of July, 5 teachers certified as trained the trainers.
Excellent, because we've seen great progress with our
Yes, ma'am.
students with reading difficulties
Yes.
using those
Yes, ma'am.
programs. Okay,
And
thanks.
those programs will be available K through 12 for utilization, because the students enroll in high school, there are times that we have kids who cannot read. So yes, ma'am.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you to both of you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Okay, thank you. Next item, Dr. Stratos is going to take us through instructional initiatives.
So good evening once again, board members and Madam Chair. I'd like to first open up the conversation that we have developed a framework of where we would like to see our instructional initiatives starting this academic school year. I will ask Mr. Fallon to share as we go through this on how we landed on identifying some schools for specific need, or what I'm using the language you'll hear us say partnering or intensive support schools. So Mr. Fallon, because we were a little competitive on this, you need to understand that Melissa Murray and myself, we did an analysis as Daniel Fallon and Brett Fritz conducted analysis. And I'd like to have him speak to that, please.
So the analysis for these schools, as Dr. Stratus mentioned, was done through 2 different teams working simultaneously. One was looking at a more of a results-based model, which you're going to hear, looking at, whether it be NWA MAP, looking at prior SC ready data, EOC data, formative or interim assessment data, to look at the outcome of. So Mr. Fritz and myself decided to look at this as more of a business type model of are the schools actually at risk? So what we did was, the most recent data that we have is 2019 state data. So what we did is we went out to the state website. We took 2019 data for the state. We looked at the all student group. We actually have an N count and we have a percent, so we know how many students are in each category. And what we did was we actually compared all of the subgroups to the all student group, essentially making a weighted opportunity ranking per category, male, female, whether it be students with disabilities or non-disabled, socioeconomically disadvantaged or not socioeconomically disadvantaged, migrant, not migrant. We went to American Indian, we went to Asian. Every ethnicity, every category that could be reported got what we would deem an opportunity index. What we could then do with that is not look at just grades 3 through 8, or at a high school, an Algebra 1 score, or an English 1 score. What we could do is we could apply that to every single student in the building, pre-K through 5 for an elementary school. So we got a little bit more of a whole school look. What we did then was applied that index to every single student. So if we had 14 reporting groups, we pulled all 14 categories out of PowerSchool, and we looked at student A, who happened to be an American Indian female that was not disabled, not socioeconomically disadvantaged, not migrant, and so on, you see, and apply the opportunity index to every single student. Then when you actually mathematically combine all the opportunity indexes, indices, you end up with an overall score for the school, regardless of grade, regardless of test. It does not matter. We applied it to all students. Dr. Stratus's team, our team, we come together, the 11 schools line up. So we're looking at a results type base, and we did have to negotiate on some, but essentially the order was exactly the same. Yes, there were areas where schools are well outperforming what their opportunity index would say. So 2 teams working independently with 2 separate sets of data, but the same overall end. And then this list was combined from both of those. So we're not looking at just results. We're not looking at just the attendance zone. We're looking at both combined together. So we're looking at the attendance zone. What do the kids look like? How should they perform if they're an average South Carolina student with these demographic characteristics? And then what is their historical outcome? So both of those pieces combined is what comes to the, I think, 11 partner schools.
And I'll share that I had his team do it the hard way. Sorry, Daniel. And my team, we actually first did anecdotal data, actually working with principals. This presentation is going to be a slice of some of the work with our principals starting on April 28th, when we started having really very focused meetings at goals and setting. So as you hear some of the resources or later on some of the non-negotiables. So we did anecdotal data, but we looked at trend data of MAP, and we looked at it over a period of time from 2019 until now. So to share that, we landed in the same place. Some of the schools that we've identified, I need you to look, as Colonel Geyer shared, on a slope from 0, but I'd like you to do a 45-degree. The top is going to be the 50th percentile. I'm doing a cheat on the Bell's curve. So we identified the schools from the 0 to the 50, really looking if you may be ballooning more here at the 45th percentile or 50th percentile, that balloon, which way is that going predominantly on numbers? So we took a little different approach, and as Daniel shared, we landed at the same place. So a lot of work, but we had to have some levels of confirmation. So we can go please to slide 3. We have identified here a list of schools. Since this has gone to print, we have included one more school on the support model on the partnering schools. That would be one of our elementary schools. We just finished having conversation at length with the principal today. So we will be adding Hilton Head School of the Creative Arts will be part of this partnering, or we want to say an intervention model. And that was after a series of conversations actually with the principal. I did not want to come forward with that until we had confirmation. If we go to page 4, please. I'd like us to recognize that key to where we are driving is in the continuous improvement model. I know we have shared this with you, and many times I want you to think of more of a centripetal model, that in the center is the child. All decisions that we make and drive is about the children. So student achievement, But what goes parallel with that are the educators. So that's why it is teaching and learning. You'll hear a little bit about opportunities of learning team facilitator. That will be a person in time as we go forward, that they will help do a deeper slice on the professional learning communities. They will work with instructional coaches. We're also going to build the capacity of our instructional coaches to be part of really building their capacity at professional learning communities. They've just completed 8 modules that we had them going through since January. We are going to take those modules to the next level. Those are being developed by an outside consultant. Standard-based instruction is key, and professional learning community meetings will be at the key of looking, review, act, do, reflect, plan is number 1. Let's go to slide 5. I'd like us to look at these from the right to the left and recognizing that the bar on the top identifies key people. Mr. Mel Campbell was making emphasis on how are we going to do. We want to make sure that we inspect what we expect. I know it is cliche-ish, but we will inspect what we expect. But we have to build that capacity and that belief, that can-do attitude. And that is actually the first door that we have to open at our school sites. And if we look at, again, from the right to left, formative assessment, working with instructional coaches, interventionists, providing training. They should have the same training as our instructional coaches. In time, we'll build the opportunity of having learning team facilitators, increasing the amount of social workers, professional development practice. You'll see that on the next page, BMS. One item that we've added here for our high schools is an opportunity in time to have credit recovery support team, where instead of waiting to the end of the year, as we go forward with funding, being able to have that extra educator on campus to run what I will call as an Edgenuity lab, which is the software that we utilize, and then also having someone that they work with who helps as the target of the kids on campus. And also being able to get a class size reduction in many of our schools. And again, this is a plan that we're building on. It is our framework. If we go to, I may have skipped the page, I do apologize. Page 6. Just a brief view. I'm on slide 6. I do apologize, Mrs. Cushenberry. I went forward. Which slide do you have up there? 6, thank you. So my numbers are off. I just shared the professional development. I would like you to go to the last item where it says learning science rigor walkthrough. In order to assure that we are teaching what needs to be taught, we'd like to build a capacity at our schools that you understand what the standard is and you're able to take a look as we're doing walkthroughs. Are we documenting the same thing so that we have a commonality within the schools of what we're looking at? We build that capacity of common language, the same way that you're doing it in the classroom, we're doing it amongst ourselves as professionals. Next slide, please. This shares the professional development initiatives we'd like to have for our educators going forward. From the principals to assistant principals, instructional coaches, and classroom teachers. It is a team that turns a school around. It is not a person, and then it is about sustainability. I call it the Wizard of Oz effect. When Oz left, what happened? We don't want that. We know it was only a dream that she may have had, but I do want to go forward. It's not a dream. This is a reality, and it's the lives of children. So it is about building capacity of our educators and our administrators simultaneously. Next slide. If you notice as well, we are focusing, and this will start on August 3rd. August 3rd, we'll be focusing social work training, as well as behavior management specialist training all day. Yes, sir.
I just want to add that this is possibly a particular area that may or may not have been developed over time in terms of regular professional development opportunities, but we do think this is an important piece, particularly when we're trying to reach students that might be struggling, right? And in addition, one of the things we want to make sure is that the first phone call home is not a phone call about whatever issue or problem it is you're dealing with, right? That the first phone call home is a good positive phone call and engagement with the parent to set the direction for the year in a positive way. And then when you have to make another phone call, it's a little more palatable. And it's already set up for a condition where you can work together towards a solution, which is ultimate benefit of the student.
That speaks to what you were speaking to earlier, Mr. Campbell. So we are seeking to, and I've used the expression earlier many times, cast the net larger, not castanetas, but casting the net larger to include more building capacity. It is not an isolated model. Next slide, Mrs. Cushenberry. Here you see where I'm sharing some of the resources that will be available. I want us to recognize that schools that were not on the earlier slide will have the same access to resources as all schools. But I want us to make note that we're partnering with our Tier 3 schools to put an extra emphasis at pushing forward student achievement and building capacity of the human capital of the school site. So this shares with you some information on the elementary tools. I do have a list of definitions that I could share with you. I do apologize it wasn't part of your packet this evening. If we can go to the next slide, please. Same model being shared with you. What you'll see different on Tier 3 is the SREB math. It is an application math tool that we will be seeking to add to a few of our schools. It gives us the why of practice. I also want to build on to something that Mr. Earl Campbell brought forward in partnering with USCB for some college credit master level courses. We are looking at these tier schools first for teachers on those campuses to deepen their content in order that now we can deepen knowledge in the classroom. That initiative is also being extended to schools south of the Broad as we start phase 2. The turnaround, the first reach out, and I will tell you, was immediate. I'm very impressed with the teachers wanting to do this and very impressed with the school leaders. And it is at a price point that is very palatable for everyone. The teachers will only pay $40 registration. My division will help. Sir?
Yeah, you know, content knowledge is critical, and prior knowledge is critical because prior knowledge determines how you interpret new knowledge quite often, right? So that's the essential part, right? So we want to try to build rich content knowledge in our kids, but in order to do that, we have to make sure that our staff also have rich and deeper content knowledge as well, right? And so the intent is that that prior knowledge that's going to inform their interpretation of new knowledge, right? I think that's the key.
Two of the biggest key areas on that initiative are actually coding, to get an understanding of coding, and then the application of coding in the classroom, as well as algebraic thinking and application of algebraic thinking into the classroom. I have to add as well, we have a content area of science in that initiative. The next item is middle grades instructional materials. At this point, I think we're rather familiar with what we're looking at growing, with the exception of no red ink. Some of you may not be familiar with that software. It is an item that we used at the high schools this past year. We saw a gradual increase of usage as we got to about December, and the turnaround from January, usage started flying high at the high schools. So there has been a demand at the high schools to have no red ink again. Then basically what that is a writing tool with a little bit of artificial intelligence in it. So as the student is writing an essay, it may help you correct or come back and do the correction for you. But there are also lessons for the teacher to embed in their coursework, in their instruction, tied to no red ink that instructors can use. And we're going to bring that into the middle school as well. We recognize that 16% of the SC ready reading and writing, 16% is the writing component. Sir?
Not just in SC Ready, but advanced placement courses. Writing is a critical area, and I think that's an area that we need to grow in significantly.
Next slide, Mrs. Cushenberry, thank you. Here I just highlighted once again the Edgenuity Lab initiative. As we go forward, being able to acquire staff, but number one priority is staffing our classrooms. We'd like to have an opportunity for kids to remain on campus and have some flexibility at learning, but also to recapture credits or that they may have lost, or if we go back into seat time model out of post-COVID, to be able to catch up on what they were missing. Next slide. If you have the opportunity to download this presentation, you will see it on the secondary side, the box on ACE Cambridge and STEM have hyperlinks tied to that just for some research for your own knowledge. Sometimes I go a little too far because I get lost in the research, but I'd like to share that this year, coming year, as I shared earlier, is the accelerated gifted programs at the schools I've identified. I'd like to also know that on the high school side of this, our secondary side is the increase of ACE Cambridge, where you will see that we have ACE or pre-ACE coming in at Robert Smalls International Academy. It will be a feeder pattern into Battery Creek. We also have ACE Cambridge going into May River High School. And as the year rolls out, I'd like to bring in a middle school, hopefully H.E. McCracken, a little hint there. Next slide. This is a slide that we could refer to as non-negotiables or tight expectations. This list is a composite of the work from the 28th of April, really from the principals and myself. It is also a slice of what went to the state on strategies for utilization for increase of academic learning in our academic recovery plan. So it is only a one-pager of a few things, but if you could take a moment to go through, and you'll see resonating themes from what came from our priority and ATSI schools. And this is the voice of those who we are working with. I do want to make emphasis for us to recognize in here, bullets are identified collaborative planning, and that's where everything starts at teaching, planning together, working smarter and together. So as we go forward this academic school year, our goal from ISD is to work with our schools, with our principals, and most of all, having the outcomes for our children. So I want to thank you for this time, allowing me to share some of the information that we're going forward with. Thank you. Please, yeah, please read the last one. That's from Ms. Murray. I had to capture that from her. Thank you, Robin.
We have a number of hands up. Mr. Mel Campbell?
The index that Daniel used, how it lined up with your information. But my question is, ones that were slightly askew, I guess, they did better than predicted. What kind of inspection did you do after you got that? And what I'm driving at is, I was here all this, and I said, everything is in place. Got the things in place. We have the culture to execute. And the reason I'm driving at that is because those schools those were indicators, those schools that were doing better than expected, it's not on paper. You can't put that on paper. You had your paperwork and it came out. How did they do better? Now we need to look at some of the things that done there and why. And the reason I'm saying that because there are a lot of things that's happening at all of us, but I'm almost willing to bet up to about 80 years in education that come break back down to the culture of the school who executes best. Principal has the best relationship with staff and children and with what teachers have best relationship with their children. So that's the other part of it that we can't measure, but you can do things to put in place. All the other things are in place. Teachers know what's expected. They know all the tools that are there. Now, how do you motivate the child to get it done? Those things you don't have. So, and I'm not telling you how or why or when to do this. I'm just saying that's the component that's kind of hard to measure. But I would suggest that we do bring in some cultural builders into the process. And when I'm saying that, I don't mean go to Washington and hire somebody who's an expert in culture building. I'm saying look around each school community, bring in some people, maybe if it's part-time, to help with the relationship building. A lot of times that's missing, and a lot of times administrators aren't astute at doing. That's the next thing I'd like us to consider.
So can I ask, I know some staff has their hands up. Can you all just go in the queue? It just makes it so much easier. So I think Dr. Bradley, could you raise your electronic hand and I will call on you, but we're just going to go in order. Next is Ingrid Boatwright.
I feel kind of bad bumping Dr. Bradley off the list. I have a comment and a quick question. I'm like Ms. Fidrich. I'm very excited by this. I think it's strategic. I think it's well defined. And I really love the Castaneda comment, which I'm going to refer to as now, because I was concerned, as you know, that we can get hung up looking at individual schools and individual communities and not look at the students as a whole. And I think that after talking to you and looking at this presentation, I think you've done a good job of getting that data to capture that. My question is with regards to ACE and implementing that at May River and implementing that at Battery Creek, Cambridge. Are those going to be school choice? I know May River has AP Capstone, and I know that Cambridge is kind of in that same genre of Capstone and IB. Is this going to be a school choice program? Is it going to replace other programs? Can you just speak a little bit about that?
We haven't looked at ACE to replace any program in any school. May River has not been put in as a choice in. It would be a model that could be utilized within the school itself. At Battery Creek, they did submit paperwork for them to be considered for a choice in for an ACE diploma. So they will be able to, in the next academic school year, have students coming in from outside of their attendance zone because they do have the capability of having more kids coming to their campus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Wisniewski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similar along the lines of the conversation that we had yesterday evening about Reading Plus and making sure that it's implemented in the future with Fidelity, since that's a newer program. I just wanted to briefly talk about iReady, because I understand that runs through our elementary to our high schools, and that's aligned to state standards and whatnot. Having daughters in the school system, I actually got something that I was personally excited about, and I have here. There's this very large jumbo mathematics iReady book that came home with her for the summer. So as a parent, I was excited about that. But I also want to make sure that these types of resources that we're receiving and that are being distributed out to kids at the end of the school year, that those things don't go unused. And I don't know if there's any plan for them. And certainly that's probably a much larger discussion. And perhaps we need to have an item on a future agenda for iReady specifically. But I just wanted to give those general comments about that, because I think that's an area that may or may not be being implemented with Fidelity. And I want to make sure that it is, because it's obviously a huge resource for us in the district.
Yes, ma'am. And I do recognize that just about 2 years ago, actually, I want to go back for this district, probably 3 or 4 years ago, there was a significant purchase of iReady hardcover with special funding. Those books, a lot of them have been pushed to school sites. Majority of those books, except for what your daughter has, a lot of the information also is in the math or reading toolkit that educators can use. this coming in July, we'll have a conversation with that probably in an executive session as well, ma'am.
Dr. Stratos on that point as well, the toolkit, those are things that we want to make sure are used with fidelity, particularly during small group instruction, either in a literacy block or in a math block, where you can utilize these resources that are there and available for our students. And so we do want to be a bit prescriptive about that. I mean, it's a valuable resource, and it's an important piece for us to utilize the impact kits.
And if I may, just one comment to follow up on that. This came home for the summer, but I do realize that our students don't have their devices necessarily at home during the summertime. And it does have the iReady and the math and different apps on it. So that's why that excited me, because she doesn't have her device, or none of my daughters do, to work during the summer. And you know, that summer slide is real. So I don't know if that's a way that we tackle that for other kids that may not have been identified for 2.0. I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Mr. Guyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really impressed. Multiple independent data interpretation that yields similar outcomes. That's what investment strategy firms do, to figure out what they're going to invest in. And to see you use that methodology to confirm your data and confirm your outcomes. I'm frankly blown away. I like it a lot. The emphasis on professional development is right on, especially with our APs, our teachers, our coaches. This is a comprehensive approach. I like the writing. Writing leads to literacy. Writing and writing and writing and writing makes people literate. And so I'm excited. Now you got to execute. But man, I'm impressed. I'm really impressed.
Dr. Rodriguez?
I just wanted to touch upon what Mr. Campbell was talking about, because one of the key functions of, for example, our executive directors is also, we're going to be utilizing our executive directors. We're going to have instructional, not reviews, instructional walks, right, with our principals and our leaders, right, to say, hey, there are certain pockets where you have multiple things happening very well, and you get the results you're talking about, and the results we point out. Then there are places where you have one thing that's really, really good. Maybe better here than over here, but it's just one thing, right? Or two things, okay? And so what we want to be able to do is our executive directors, as part of working with their portfolio of principles, right, is take their portfolio of principles to do walkthroughs at different schools to talk about those things, to see those things living and breathing in particular schools that are succeeding. No, we don't necessarily, like you said, we don't have to go cross country to find some really good things. We have some really good things. We just need to take those really good things and proliferate those really good things. That's the ticket. And the things that work maybe in this type of school that we can apply in that type of school and whatever else. So that is in the plan, Mr. Campbell, in terms of how we're going to utilize executive directors as well.
Dr. Bradley?
Yeah, so I just wanted to really piggyback on what Dr. Rodriguez said, and also take a moment to respond to Mr. Campbell. I agree with you. I think with all of the instructional infrastructure and instructional initiatives that are being built out of our instructional services division, they truly cannot exist separate and distinct from creating a culture of excellence around teaching and learning. I think we really understand that, and that's not conversations that we haven't had internally. But at the same time, we're really charging our principals for leading that culture work, and that's going to be very much a part of our kind of professional development with them this summer. Because while we are asking so much of so many people within our buildings, if we don't have a true culture of excitement, motivation, inspiration to have a steep spike in performance outcomes next year, we're not going to be able to sustain any of this kind of infrastructure and the strategy that we've deployed. So we're really excited about that, but I do think that you'll see some noted difference around what happens in classrooms and the culture of teaching and learning, as I mentioned before, when you get into buildings. And also, to Dr. Rodriguez's point, there are going to be layers of accountability. This work does not simply fall on the shoulders of teachers. This work simply doesn't fall on the shoulders of principals. Entire leadership teams are going to be wrapping their arms around this work. So those are some of the things that we really expect will be different within buildings next year.
Mr. Earl Campbell?
When we talk about culture and history, and Mr. Smith bring it up quite a bit, and Mel was talking about bringing someone in from outside. We have a lot of folks right in this county that know the history. And I'm not talking about history just here in South Carolina, but history in the United States. The folks that I got my information from were folks that some of them didn't even graduate from the 3rd grade. And everything I talk about and taught, I got it from those folks. We don't have to go all over the United States looking for folks. We have folks right here in this county. And I think that if we get those folks to come into our school, talk to our students, not just black students, all the students, and you would see a difference in the attitude, behavior, because they will know the truth. And I think that is what is. I was just talking to a guy yesterday. They're talking about critical, whatever they call it.
Critical race theory.
Right. If you know the truth, if you taught the truth, we wouldn't have the problem that we have in this country today. You know? And it's not that I'm asking to change how we teach children, but we have to tell the truth and let them know the truth, whether it's bad or whether it's good, you know, and let our teachers know that. We have all that right here in this county. Thank you very much.
Mr. Smith?
I was actually definitely agree with what Mr. Campbell was just saying, and just to speak to the point of that, you know, that I talk about culture a lot because it's brought up a lot when people see me in the community as well. There's a deep concern in my community right now for the students in my district. However, Mr. Mel Campbell, basically the stuff that I alluded to during the last discussion, I think is basically he said the same thing during this discussion, and I think that he was spot on, and pretty much it seemed like he just read my mind what I wanted to say, and just to. So in other words, I'm not going to repeat what he said because everything what he said is what I wanted to reiterate again. But also, when I talk about the desire of understanding and bringing the cultural awareness, because it really takes a team of people. And you know, Dr. Bradley just said something about there's going to be a team. You know, and I would in the future I would definitely like to see what that team would look like in terms of staff, teachers, administrators, counselors, you know, just different people, community members, because that is what is really going to take to start transferring the negative to the positive side and the positive energy. And the reason why I speak about some of this to bring it to a close is that I want each and every single kid, no matter who they are, where they are, to experience at my elementary school what I experienced. And, you know, and like I said, that was just, it was basically learning. Learning was exciting. You know, we wanted to go to school. It was a culture that we loved. And I think that every kid in Beaufort County, whether they're north or south or abroad, should experience that. And that's what I would like to bring to the table and like to bring to make sure that that's the culture that we have here in Beaufort County. Thank you.
So I have probably a real basic question, but so you have these 3 tiers. And so the schools in Beaufort County School District, you put into one of these tiers based on these identifying, I guess say characteristics or whatever?
Those were the general ones that my team utilized. And then the identifiers by Mr. Fallon's team worked a little more strategically than we did. We used those identifiers that you see on slide 2, inclusive of the prior baseline data of 2019 that we had standardized testing and all the projection data we were able to pull.
So does the state do something similar for schools? No.
I'll let him say that.
So our department, Mr. Fritz and myself, we are from the private sector. So we looked at this and we dove into this, me being a computer scientist and him coming from the auto industry and evaluation of auto plants. We actually took both of those, the math side of me and the analysis of a plant or a factory, and meshed those two together. So no, that is not an educational way of looking at things,
Okay.
But it is a way of leveling a playing field to a standard, the standard being the state. We could do the same thing once 2021 data comes out and is released by the state. We can immediately turn that around and redo that based on an enrollment on any given day of any given school year. So what that does is it takes a model that can be very flexible and it's a nimble dynamic programming. So it's nimble, being that if we unforeseen, we rezone a school, we can tell you what that school's opportunity index would be right off of the enrollment. So we can actually see impacts along the way on the potential impact of a change of a street or the change of a choice or anything based on state unified numbers off the most recent assessment data. We can apply that to that population.
Oh, impressive.
Now you understand why I let Mr. Fallon give the details.
Yeah.
But it is impressive. I thought it was brilliant when I was thinking of the ranking and classification. They were already working on it. And I brought him in and said, look, let's do this. And like, here it is. So if I, Madam Chair, may make one comment to build on the culture. So when we had our AP training this past week, an exercise I had the administrators do was think about your achievements on one side on a column. On the other side, I had you write down your deltas, areas of improvement. With that, I had you say, the third part I did on that was, I want you to take a line, a horizontal line, do a fulcrum of a seesaw. One side do a heart, the other side the academic wreath. Where did your achievements fall? Where's your seesaw? Take a look at yourself. I think it's critical as we do reflective practice that is something that our administrators take to look at themselves. And then as they look at their deltas, where did they really fall? Are we a technocrat or are we taking a humanistic approach? We shared with our upcoming principals, because the APs will be upcoming principals, language that is used very forcefully from Dr. Bradley, that where do you fall in that culture and development in the school? It is critical because you could turn discipline around just by creating the environment of opportunity. And that was a theme that we utilized, sir. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Smith, if you have one last question.
My question is, excuse me if you already explained it, but what is the ACE and the Cambridge? What are those?
So those are,
go ahead.
I apologize, Mrs. Smith, and thank you for asking. ACE in Cambridge, so Cambridge we recognize as a university in the United Kingdom. They have a unified curriculum for high school. that is weighted equal at a 6.0 GPA weighting. When a student passes at high school a ACE test, they are able to have the opportunity to also in states or universities that accept to get college dual credit. So it is an opportunity for students to sit for a little more diverse assessment where the students select the questioning on the day that they sit for their exam within that specific course. Where a lot of times when you go sit for an AP exam, you don't know what you're going to get. One of the advantages with Cambridge or ACE is what we say at the high school level, is that choice for that student when they sit for that exam, that it is a high stakes exam, but they just have a little more choice of what they get to be responded to when they're doing essay writing, sir. So, and at the middle school, it is a curriculum to help build knowledge and base knowledge and logic and practice and writing skills for our kids, our students, as they proceed into or choose to proceed into ACE courses at the high school.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we've, I think, we've given a very good presentation. I think it's time to move on. And if,
thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
I just had one more question.
well, Mr. Smith, you need to appeal my decision to move on and make a motion and we'll vote.
Well, Madam Chair, you let other people ask more questions, but I won't go there tonight. That's just ridiculous. I won't stoop to
Thank
that
you
level.
very much, Daniel and Dr. Stratos. Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes, next is our fiscal responsibility, and Ms. Crosby is going to take us through the monthly transparency report, the monthly 100K report, and the board monthly budget.
Yes, good evening. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to bundle these three reports together this evening. These are the April reports for the $100,000. You have the detail and the consolidated versions, as well as the transparency report and the monthly board budget. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Mr. Smith, could you put your hand down and then back up if you're going to have a question on this topic, please? Thank you, sir. There do not seem to be any questions. Oh, Ms. Fidrich, yep, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Tanya, the two reports, let me go back here to board docs, I'm sorry, the $100,000 report and then the $100,000 report. Are we at some point, are you expecting us at some point to make a decision about one or the other instead of producing both reports? Was that not something we had?
We did have a discussion in a previous meeting, and
so go ahead. I'm sorry, Tanya.
Sorry, my internet connection is a little spotty this evening, so I apologize, but we had a discussion in a previous meeting, and I believe there was not an interest to choose one or the other. So we just continued to bring both. But if the board at any time wishes to prefer one or the other, and I'd be happy to entertain that. But we'll just continue to bring them both until that time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Crosby, does that conclude your presentation?
I do have one last thing kind of in the name of transparency. I wanted to update you on a couple of things that happened this week that are very important. One is on Monday, the school impact fees were passed in third and final reading with County Council. That was on Monday evening. It was a vote of 7-4. So we will begin that process. I have already reached out to the county and with my own internal staff, and we will begin to build a structure for what needs to be done to set up our funding sources as well as the counties, and then how we will communicate the information back and forth and record that information in our financial statements. So we'll be working on that with our internal staff and our partnership with the county as well. So also I am happy to report that this afternoon there was a budget meeting and with County Council, the third and final reading of the school district budget for 21-22 school year, and the budget has passed. It was a vote of 7-4. So we are going to continue to, we will begin implementing the new budget as of tomorrow, and our staff is primed and ready to begin to implement the pay increases that are included in that. And we're looking forward to beginning that new fiscal year. And we will be updating the staff in a release to all employees of what the pay increases will be for certified and professional, which is basically a step for all for the new year, step increase for all. We are going to restore the step for those certified staff who did not receive a step in the 2011-2012 school year. The mandatory $1,000 increase to the base salary, and max step increases will move from 24 to 25 years. In addition, the administrative and classified employees will receive a step and 2% cost of living increase. So those things will be communicated to staff likely tomorrow, definitely before the weekend, and we'll be moving forward with the New Year's budget. That's all I have for this evening.
I would just make a request. Thank you, Tanya, for your update. And can you just please copy the board on what you send to the staff in terms of, because you just said a lot of numbers. I think I got them, but it's nice to see it in writing.
Yes, we will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
Rodriguez, we're down to other matters.
I think the last item here was an update on South of the Broad board meeting location. Robin, is that? Mark, are you available? Are you on?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to announce that we have explored the different sites on Hilton Head, and the best one for us determined by the staff was at Hilton Head SCA. We have already made preparations for the wiring connections coming off of the soundboard in the room. Therefore, it would be easy for our partners at the county channel to bring their truck close to the building and make a direct connection with it. We hope by the end of next week we'll have the live YouTube test with the county. We've already done basic sound checks with the county. We were just waiting on one more piece of getting their switcher unit in their truck hooked back up to us, and it was regarding a connection through our network. Since we are different organizations, we don't allow any outside party or computer to be directly connected to our network. So we're working on a stopgap method to make sure that we do have great service going out to the truck, and we will be testing that next week. So we should be able to bring back to the board after these tests that the room is ready to go.
Dr. Wisniewski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to ask if there was any discussion regarding a Bluffton location still going on, or if that was kind of ruled out.
We have not explored more than just areas at the two high schools in Bluffton, and we did not explore it any further after moving forward with SCA.
Ms. Cushingberry?
In case you couldn't hear, she was just saying that Bluffton is still not available to us yet, is what she said.
And my other question for Mark is, I just got an email that I forwarded to several people from Hilton Head that said that their council chambers would be available for school board meetings starting in September. Was that one of the venues you already investigated?
I don't think at the time we investigated the county chambers, but we can.
Yeah, it would be the town chambers. I maybe misspoke. Yeah, since they reached out to us, I mean, could you see if that's an option too?
We can look into it.
Ms. Boatwright?
Thank you, Mr. Shohan. This is very exciting. What date are we looking at for this meeting?
We would hope for the August meeting, not July.
No, I figured not July, but I was hoping maybe before school started. I don't know what our August meeting schedule is, so I didn't know if we were that close, but that would be awesome.
Yes, I think we're very close, and it's pretty minor problem that we have to work out with the network authentication piece, and the engineers are already working on it.
Great, thank you. And thank you to you too, Robin. I know you want that, and Molly.
Yeah. All right, we're now down to board business action, and with a motion to recommend temporary suspension of AR Student Services 36, Student Athletics, Roman numeral 4, grade point average and eligibility to participate in athletic activities. And I believe this was Mr. Mel Campbell's item.
And compared for that, yeah, I'd like to make a motion that the board recommend to superintendent that we temporarily suspend that regulation that involves the grade point average for athletic participation is regulation SS 36 at grade point average and eligibility.
I second that motion.
Okay. So go ahead and speak about it.
And the reason for it, the justification for it, is after the pandemic. You know, we like to have, all the children engaged, but with all the support around them that's necessary to improve their academics. And I think that a lot of athletes, they're supported by the coaches and they need to be participating. And if during the pandemic those grades went down where they can't participate, that'll be disengagement and it'll probably hinder, them further, hamper them further than if they were on the football field or on the basketball court or tennis court or whatever. So I think that, anything we can do to assist in terms of student participation necessary, and coaches can easily, access their athletes if they're in the program. Go find them if they're not playing football this. So that's my adjustment. And I've discussed it with a couple of coaches countywide, and they feel that is a necessary move.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I too have gotten several calls from several coaches throughout the county telling me that and asking for some assistance for this rule to be suspended for quite some time now, saying how this is affecting the athletes and also how this is affecting them in the classrooms, because with some students, being an athlete is what drives them to be more successful in the classroom. Unfortunately, that may be it should be the other way around. But with this being a part of the driving force to help some students stay actively engaged, I think this is very important in that what we're asking of students is more than what the state is requiring. So I think for us to step back and to give students a fighting chance to be able to participate in sports and not eliminate them before they eliminate themselves, according to the state, to be on an equal playing field as everyone else in the state due to this pandemic. I think it's very important that we make this adjustment. Thank you.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, I have spoken with our lead athletic director, Carlos Cave, and he's actually on the line here. And we had a discussion about this and asked him to work with and engage with the other athletic directors in the county around this and what it might look like. And they brought back to me the following proposal, which would any student that falls below a 2.0 GPA, but meets the South Carolina High School League eligibility requirement, right, would be allowed to participate. And in the process, obviously, the student would be, their coaches and the athletic directors and their eligibility coordinators would be monitoring student progress on a regular basis. They're going to have the GPA check weekly on how the students are doing, right? And what they came up with was that students who would drop below a 2.0 during the course of this semester in which they're trying to stay eligible, right? That they would stay engaged, but with the team, but not participate until they brought themselves up above the 2.0 during the existing semester. So they get the go ahead to get started, but then they have to stay engaged and maintain above the 2.0, because ultimately they want them to get above that 2.0 in order to be eligible on their own with the 2.0 requirement that we had, right? So that was that came from the athletic directors. Middle and high school athletic directors would monitor and submit monthly on a standardized form the progress of how those particular students are doing, and then generate a monthly report on that, so that they're keeping track of it and sharing with us how they're doing. So their effort is, let's give them the opportunity to get engaged and play, but we also want them to do their part and keep their academics up, because at the end of the temporary suspension, we want them eligible on their own, right? So that's
all right. Ms. Boatwright?
So I have been like Wimbledon tennis spectators on this issue. When I first read it, I said, no, we don't lower expectations. That's not how you encourage achievement. But I have had my mind very dramatically changed. And one thing I'll tell you is I have two stories that have kind of played into this. One, my father was a college athlete and went on to be a professional athlete. Turns out he didn't have a 2.0. He came from a poor family, and they didn't really, care what his grades were. And so he actually had the opportunity to go to college because of his athleticism. This is for the NCAA. And while there, they wanted him to do PE because he was a basketball player. He wasn't a student, but he fell in love. He read a separate piece, fell in love with English, became an English major, and was a high school teacher. So I do think, so that kind of struck me. I was like, wow, this really applies to me. On the other side, I've had relatives who have been recruited at the college level, where there's a lot of opportunities for coaches to take advantage of kids who are athletically gifted. And what I worry about is, we want to hold them and remind them that they're student athletes, right? That they're students first, athletes second in the school district. But I have a couple of questions, real rapid fire. One, we don't have a similar requirement for performing arts, do we? Or for any other after-school activities? This is an athletics only requirement, right?
That falls under the extracurricular South Carolina High School Activities Association would fall under that requirement.
So it's not just athletic, it's performing arts as well? Musical theater, plays, choirs, travel choir, show choir.
I believe the AR is specifically addressing athletics, so.
And we're one of only 2 districts in South Carolina that require above what South Carolina requires. So I am in favor of this for all the reasons that I'm sure will be articulated. I also think it's worth looking at how, if we do this, how it impacts things, how it impacts students and revisiting, because I would hate for kids to miss on an opportunity. If they come to school, they're in class, they have that, they may not ever get that spark, but they may read a book that changes the course of things. So the other thing is, I do think there should be an attendance piece as well, maybe with some of these changes, to make sure that kids don't, especially with virtual school, that they don't do something different. So those are my thoughts.
Dr. Wisniewski?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Rodriguez and our athletic director, Mr. Cave, for sharing his recommendations, because my question was going to be in regard to the South Carolina High School League's requirements of course loads. So I think that direction is definitely well thought out, and I support that direction. My main question is in regard to the temporary word that's used. I just would like maybe perhaps that the motion includes when that temporary status would be revisited, or how long this is for. I know in others we've suspended things for a period of a year. So if that could be added to the motion, otherwise I support it. Thank you.
Why don't you make that amended motion?
Sure. So I move that we add, sorry, I'm trying to pull up the motion here.
You know what, Dr. Wisniewski, I was thinking the exact same thing. So maybe just strike temporary suspension and just put in suspend for the 2021-22 school year, something like that.
Perfect. So I move that we strike temporary suspension and replace with suspend for the 2021-2022 school year. Administrative Regulation SS 36 student
And we
athletics.
do we need a second on the amended motion?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Boatwright made the second. So now discussion on okay, so hold off and we'll come back to the other one probably.
Discussion on this.
So hold on a second. So you're removing temporary suspension and replacing it with suspend for the 2021-22 school year and the rest of it. So this amended motion takes priority. So right now we're only discussing the amendment. So do you have any comments about that? Mr. Earl Campbell, you haven't spoken yet.
I was going to talk about the
other
first
part?
motion.
Yeah, okay, so we'll come back to you. Any, Kathy Robine?
Yes, this has to do with so if we suspend it for the 21-22 school year, I agree that it should be suspended for the students to start, but it seems to me what I heard Dr. Rodriguez say that the athletic directors are proposing is that once the school year starts, that then it sounds like the students that are engaged will be held to that 2.0 standard. Is that correct? Is that what's being proposed?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Rodriguez.
Yeah,
I can also make a comment.
So when I have Mr. Cave I believe he's on as well, and he can respond. But essentially, what they're doing is the 1.0 makes them eligible to get going, right, and to play. But the idea being that they also hold up their end of the bargain in terms of their work on their academics as well. And I believe that's what the athletic directors were thinking, and as they move through it, because they ultimately want the kids to, or want the students to get over that 2.0 threshold and stay over that 2.0 threshold. So if they dropped beneath that during the course of the week or of a week, that they would then sit out until they bumped their GPA back over 2.0. Mr. Cave, are you on?
Yes.
Was that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The thought process among the ADs, everything about this proposal is data driven and student centered, and it is with the idea of those that have, for whatever reason, have had academic struggles and their GPA currently is below that 2.0 threshold. We were seeking the ability to allow them under certain restrictions to participate this school year, but we would closely monitor those students, and with the assistance of our eligibility coordinator, that all middle and high schools, we have that as a stipend position. Through that position, it would allow us to monitor those kids, work with the teachers, and ensure those that begin the year not meeting the 2.0 threshold, that we can get them above that mark, and that they could, with guidance and support, move them beyond that 2.0 GPA. So what we're basically asking again is that we be allowed to more closely work with, extend an olive branch to those kids that have struggled during the pandemic, and allow them to come in if they meet the South Carolina High School League standards, be allowed to join the team, but under strict monitoring and assistance being given to them to hopefully move them beyond. Because in most cases, it struggles in one or two classes that are dropping their GPAs below that 2.0 threshold, and we desire to. We would really like to want this plan in place so that as a district we have data, because we want to compile and see through this modification, our ability to then help our athletes, and not just athletes, student athletes, and to lend some assistance, and then monitor closely that assistance, and then document and present that data once we compile it during the course of first and second semester.
So I would like to comment too that I was like Ms. Boatwright at first. I was like, oh no, we don't want to lower our standards, but I think this is exactly what needs to be done this year. This pandemic certainly threw everybody a curveball. And to Kathy's question, if you look at the SS36 4A, the last bullet point is that the previous year has to have that weighted GPA of 2.0. So I think the Dr. Wisniewski's amendment making it for this school year is very much in keeping with following what our regulation has been previously. And the whole idea is get the students engaged, get them participating in sports, get the assistance that they need with their academics, and we want them above the 2.0. They got to work and strive towards that 2.0. So this hopefully will just be for this year. So are there anybody who wants to comment any further on this, on just the amendment that it's going to be for this school year? Okay, Ms. Boatwright.
Going to get complicated. So if we suspend regulation SS36, because we're talking about for playing in the 2021, right? But the GPA would have to be suspended for the spring, right? Does the motion adequately express what we're trying to do? Go ahead.
What I understand from the recommendation to be is to suspend it for the entire year.
Right, but I'm saying, so just because I don't want to, because I'm trying to get the motion right, if you had a 1.0 in spring, without this, you would be ineligible to play.
Exactly.
But we're not suspending the GPA for the spring 2021.
So
just suspending the requirement?
what we're doing basically is moving to the high school league eligibility requirement for the course of the year.
I feel very good about what we're trying to do. I just want to make sure our motion with those specific date range is going to achieve that, just because if we're suspending the GPA and people are coming in, it's the spring into fall stuff. But anyway, it's just my thought.
You're talking about next spring into the following year. Is that what you're?
Yeah, so I'm overcomplicating it. I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I was just wondering, because I had talked to an AD about this, and there was just a hint of confusion about the fact that right now these kids already have a 1.0. So we're suspending the requirement that they play. But anyways, I just want to make sure that we didn't have to include last spring as far as suspending the requirement, because when are they deemed eligible?
Yeah, I understand your point. This past spring that's the
GPA we're looking at.
Right. And so my interpretation, that's a good word, we're using it a lot these days. My interpretation of what the recommendation is that they'd be eligible to play in the fall. And that means, to make that happen, that means that whatever that GPA is in that previous semester, right, has to be a 1.0 or above in order to be inconsistent with the goal is to get them to play, allow them to play in the fall, and then put this monitoring piece in place that the athletic directors have come up with in order to.
Right, and that's the distinction I was going to make sure we didn't need to worry about, the distinction between eligibility to play and when they were deemed eligible. That's why I want to make sure that we weren't messing that up.
I think the goal is for them to play in the fall.
I'm with you.
All right.
All right, so anybody else have any comment about the time frame? Mr. Smith, just the amended motion.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm concerned that that we're digging too deep into it, because can we have a copy of the original motion when the board made the 2.0 rule?
Well, it's an AR, so this wouldn't have been, this is not board policy. This is an administrative regulation. And we don't vote on these, they just show them to us, basically.
Okay, right. That's what I'm trying. Okay, that's what I'm trying to. That is what I'm trying to figure out, because I too have the concern that Mrs. Robine have. If we're to, because it seems like if we're voting on it, then we should just be voting to suspend it for a year, and the other parts that the ADs have. It seemed like it's good that they're telling us, but that's not what I've gathered from coaches, and it makes me wonder. Will that be sufficient? Will that be efficient enough to what they're asking for? Because in one area, I hear you saying that the kids are able to practice and participate, but I know kids, the kids can practice and participate, but if you're saying that they can't play, then the kids will not stay actively engaged for but so long. So it concerns me that either we are allowing the kids to play and participate, or either we're not. You can't have your cake and eat it here. So I get the point that the kids, if the kids have a solid year to turn around their grades from a 1.5 to a 2.0 or whatever for the following school year, that's understandable. But to say that we're encompassing all this, because it's a lot of conversation that I heard. That's why I was quiet and listening. This is really concerning, because we're not really doing what they're asking for, because we're adding to it. So it's either that they're going to be that they're going to be allowed to play and practice with the team and be a team player with the under 2.0, or they're not. So that is where. So I am lost because it's been so much said that I will need an understanding to help me understand where I will vote at on this.
So since this is an administrative regulation and the original motion has in it, when we come back to that, about we're directing Dr. Rodriguez. Yes, right?
It's a recommendation.
We didn't need the amendment. That's what my point. We're actually Dr. Rodriguez can decide whether here ADs address, statement. But, I just want to say that the amendment doesn't. We can't fine tune the amendment. We're asking him.
I can't hear you, Mr. Campbell. Can you talk to us, Mike? I can't hear you.
We're asking Dr. Rodriguez to suspend this. This is a request. He doesn't have to do anything at all. He can leave it the way it is, but we're asking him to suspend that administration regulation.
Okay.
And that's all we're asking him to do. And
right.
He said he had did some background work on it, and the ADs agreed to a certain template. And I'm like you in terms of that. That's the thing I want to address when we got this amendment out of the way, is the AD's suggested mode of operating. But right now we're on this amendment, and I personally don't think it's necessary that we pigeonhole it to.
Well,
exactly.
So I understand what you're saying, but I would think we have to, because for a couple reasons. One is because of what the AR says. It's based on a minimum 2.0 for the prior year. So I think we have to suspend it for a year if we're going to change or alter it, or whatever word you want to use. But also, I think it's important that families know that now, how about the 2022-2023 school year? Probably, it's likely, given it's only a 1-year suspension, that the floor is going to be 2.0 again. It's not going to be the South Carolina High School League of 1.0. So to me, that's why I think it's important. I think it's important to be upfront with the families and the students of this is a temporary suspension only for the coming school year. But I'll let, do you have any more to say about just this 1-year suspension, Dr. Rodriguez? No. All right, so let's vote.
I'm still confused.
We're just voting on whether the suspension is going to be for 1 year or not. We haven't yet approved the suspension. Okay, so the motion carries 8-1, and the 1 no is Mr. Smith. So now we go back, and Robin will put up the that original motion, but it's now got this part in it, that it's for the 2021, 2022. It's a suspension for just this school year. And let's see, Dr. Rodriguez. You want to speak about this, or you've had enough commenting?
No, I understand that.
Perfect. All right, Mr. Campbell, Earl Campbell.
They were only asking for 1 year suspension, and you see how much discussion we've had on this. And there are only 2 districts, our district and one other district, that have that requirement. And that is the reason why those other districts win more championship than we do. So I think that what maybe we need to talk to the South Carolina League about this. You know, because we are playing at a disadvantage. We are.
Okay, hold on. All right, next is, thank you, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Mel Campbell.
I'm not.
I
know.
Campbell, that's us.
Listen, I understand that, and I know the reason why we did that. I was voted for this, but I'm saying that we need to
want everybody to be here too.
That's what I'm talking about. Okay. And that was my argument when we did it.
Good luck.
You know, because we have some students that are good in sports right here in this county, but they will not play because they can't maintain that. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Well, this year they can play, so.
But, okay, I was gonna say, regardless of what, I mean, I think it has to be for a year automatically because some sports go across semesters, first of all, right? Some sports go across semesters. That's one thing, but I think the other thing, and I think Dave did speak to this, is it's also intended to engage the coaching and athletic directors and growing those athletes to a 2.0. You know, that's so and more so than just, I heard the point of the guiding and monitoring. I mean, it's probably going to require some additional study halls and stuff like that to make sure that these kids are made eligible again. That's the real intent of it. And hopefully that does grow a culture of students who want to do a 2.0 GPA. Because, I mean, it's got long-term benefit more so than just participating this year. The long-term benefit of getting the grade point average up is important, particularly when it comes to being eligible for college athletics. And you know, and students don't realize that. I had an experience where I had a young man in 10th grade. He didn't know what the clearinghouse is looking for. Coaches don't tell him that. Running around playing, he's a gifted athlete, 2-time state champ, but he didn't know what kind of grades he needed to go to USC. I said, I'm not gonna be able to get in with these grades I'm looking at. So we argued for about an hour and realized that I'm telling the truth. So you gotta put a little bit more, you know, studying and get those grades up if you wanna run D1. I could be able to run D1, track stuff. But, and those things, see, that wouldn't have been a conversation for him, except that he was right on that line. He was right on that line. And when I looked at those major grades, it was below the 2.0. But if a student is thinking that and engaged with GPA and what it takes early, it's an easier job later on. And I think that's a win-win to suspend it, but it's also something that we want to continue to push toward is academic excellence for all those students. That'll drive the rest of the student population too. That's a culture builder. You know, when student athletes are good students and care about their grades and are going to class, that builds the culture in the school too. That's another innate thing that builds culture.
Since we've had quite a lengthy discussion already, I'll just ask, I'm going to call on you, but if you don't have, could you please limit your comments to something that has not already been discussed? Ms. Boatwright. We're trying to move along here. This is our second night. This is our 8th hour. Let's go.
Yeah, but this is, I think, a big deal for a lot of students. And I think it's impactful. And I don't know, Mr. Campbell, where you were driving at, if you're saying we should go to the 1.0 or stay with the 2.0, but I would be more than happy to look at, because I don't like the temporary nature of it. I don't like, it causes confusion. It causes discussion. Not only that, this is a retroactive standard. There are students in the spring that did more, we're worried about it, upset about it to get that 2.0. And now we're going back and saying, hey, don't worry about it. Because these other students who didn't work at it and didn't push as hard and didn't get the 2.0, they're going to play too. So yeah, I know it's late, but I think this is a big deal for students. And I think that I'm all for it. Let them play. If they've got the 1.0, especially with COVID, they should have those moments on the field. They should have those experiences. They should, whatever they've got going on. But I don't like, to be honest with you, temporary retroactive changes to standards. I think there's a better way to do it.
Mr. O'Campbell?
I was just going to say that a lot of the things that was mentioned about monitoring, all that's been in place ever since we created this 2.0. I know at Rail Branch and Battery Creek they did. They had a study hall every afternoon before they even went to practice.
Mr. Smith?
Sitting here, I would just like to say, I agree with Ms. Boatwright, and with a lot that's been said about this. This here does takes a lot of conversation, but for the most part, is that we have to understand that we have kids who are dependent on us as board members to make the best decision within their best of interest. So when you take a kid who, for instance, as myself, who was in school with a learning disability, who might not been able to make that 1.1, that 1.7, or that 2 point, or that 2.0 even to play sports. It's very important that we give each and every kid the same equal opportunity and fair shot in this district. And that's why I will support this. And as Mr. Campbell said, now we will also this can also possibly be as I'm thinking measured by how we will watch how the ADs, since they came up with this plan, how they're structuring their athletic programs to get these students prepared to get this 2.0 within a year when this come back before us again. So I just want to put that out there, that let's be mindful that everybody ain't gonna be architect, everybody ain't gonna be astronaut, and some people might not even be an attorney, but everybody deserves a chance. Thank you.
All right, the question is called.
Kathy, are you voting? Are you still there? Ms.
Yeah, I'm confused. I thought the other one, the 1 year thing passed.
The 1 year thing did pass. I feel like I'm the spokesperson since I'm nearest to the screen, but feel free to put me in my place, Madam Chair.
Yeah, stop talking. You haven't been recognized.
Sorry.
All right, the motion carries 9-0-0. All right, so now we need a motion for approval of consent agenda.
So moved.
All right, you made the motion, a second?
Second.
Ms. Vidrich? All right. Question is called. Okay. Boatwright, Vidrich, second. Consent agenda approval. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
The motion, consent agenda items are approved unanimously. Those are the June 1, 2021 meeting minutes. So now we're down to future agenda topics, and I would ask you to raise your electronic hand if you would like to make an agenda topic recommendation. Dr. Wisniewski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to recap the two that I briefly mentioned. The one in regard to students testing out or leaving, needing an IEP, our SPED students. That may be an academic committee agenda item, I'm not sure. And then additionally, there was the deeper dive into iReady and how that's being deployed.
Thank you. All right, we have a reminder to take the board survey that you'll receive electronically within 24 hours of this meeting. Before adjournment, we need to go back into executive session or continue our executive session discussion. So why don't we have a 5-minute recess and then we'll be in executive session. Thank
Madam
you.
Chair?
Yes, Dr. Wisniewski?
Sorry, under the announcements, I was just going to say that I just had one for the Ad hoc Bluffton Committee. I believe I'd made a previous announcement at another board meeting that the Beaufort County Treasurer was going to be presenting at our June meeting. However, that's been moved to our July meeting.
Thank you. All right, so right now it is 8:46, so let's come back at 8:51. Beaufort County Board of Education, business meeting of June 30, 2021. The board just came out of executive session and we are now back in public session. And do we have any action as necessary or appropriate coming out of executive session?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have action. And with first, I move that the Board of Education approve amendment number 20 with contract construction. Phase 1 technology and safety security work at James J. Davis Early Childhood Center, which has the guaranteed maximum price of $892,525.
Do we have a second? Okay, Mr. Earl Campbell, second. Any discussion? The question is called. The motion carries 801. The one abstention is Dr. Wisniewski. Mr. Mel Campbell, do we have any further action as necessary or appropriate?
Further action. I move that the Board of Education approve amendment number 21, the contract construction for Phase 1 technology and safety security work at Joseph S. Shanklin Elementary School for the guaranteed maximum price of $879,660.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Boatwright, second. Mr. Smith?
I would just like to say I will support this motion due to this is a bond referendum project and the public has pretty much spoken on all these projects right here. So I will support that. And also being that I do have one question. Being that these projects are cut up in phases, will we get an update on how much money is spent that's allocated for the next phase of the project when it's bought? How much money is spent out of that? Could we have that? Dr. Rodriguez, could you give me some input on that?
Mr. Smith, this is Robert Otting, and yes, sir, we will report to the Operations Committee every month on how we're progressing and where the money is going and how it's being spent. So we'll be sure to do that.
All due respect, that's not my question. My question is when the motions come up, and it's another phase. Along with that phase, when you're telling how much money is being spent on the project, will there be a number to tell how much money was currently spent on the project so that we can keep up with, because there's a lot of projects going out right now?
Oh, I'm sorry. I understand what you're saying. Yes, sir. You're saying when we bring the next motion, make sure we show what's been spent to date as part of that motion.
Yes, sir. That has to deal with that phase. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We'll make sure that's done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right, the question is called. The motion carries 801. Dr. Wisniewski abstained. Mr. Mel Campbell?
Okay, I move that Board of Education approve amendment number 22, contract construction for Phase 1 technology and safety security work at MC Riley Elementary School for the guaranteed maximum price of $919,707.
Do we have a second? All right, Mr. Earl Campbell? There being no hands up, the question is called. Mr. Smith?
I just want to say the same thing as going forward on this. The same thing. I will support this motion because this is 8% project, and the community has already voted for this and spoke for this. So I will support this project. Thank you.
It's not 8%.
Light. The motion carries 801. Dr. Wisniewski abstained. Mr. Mel Campbell?
Madam Chair, I move we accept Superintendent's recommendation to employ Bradley Parents as principal of Robert Smalls International Academy.
Do we have a second? All right, Mr. Earl Campbell? Mr. Smith?
Madam Chair, I will not be able to vote on this. I'll support this because of the fact that I have not read the documents that goes along with this today. Just when I was up there, those documents weren't ready. So I'm not comfortable because I have not put my eyes on it. So I will be abstaining from this motion. Thank you.
All right, the question is called.
Edwards, yes.
I'm not getting it either. Guads, yes.
Guyer, yes.
Boatwright, yes.
Robine, yes.
Wisniewski, yes.
Smith, abstention. Abstain.
The motion carries 801. Mr. Smith abstaining. Mr. Mel Campbell?
Okay. Madam Chair, I move we accept the superintendent's recommendation for Tanja Wheeler as principal of Head Island Middle School.
Second.
Ms. Boatwright, second the motion. Mr. Smith?
This will be the same. I was not able to look at these documents and to understand and put my eyes on it to understand what we're working with. Thank you. So I will abstain again. Thank you.
The question is called. The motion carries 801. Mr. Smith abstaining. Dr. Rodriguez would like to make an announcement.
Thank you, Dr. Gwads and board members. At this time, I'd like to formally announce several of the principal positions. First one would be Ms. Michelle Sackman, who will be the principal at Beaufort Elementary School. Ms. Melissa Voigt, who will be the principal at Mossy Oaks Elementary School. Ms. Melissa Holland, who will serve as principal at MC Riley Elementary School. And moving up from assistant principal positions, Mrs. Davina Coleman will be the principal at Ladies Island Elementary. Mrs. Marvin Neal will be the principal at Whale Branch Elementary. Mr. Ryan Milling will be the principal at H.E. McCracken Middle. And Mrs. Denise Lassard will be the principal at Battery Creek High School. And as we just mentioned, we had two candidates, Ms. Tanja Wheeler, who will be the principal at Hilton Head Island Middle, and Mr. Bradley Terrence, who will be the principal at Robert Smalls International Academy. So congratulations to these candidates, and we look forward to working with them.
Mr. Smith, can you lower your hand and put it back up if you would like me to call on you? We have a motion to adjourn. Ms. Vidrich, second?
So move.
Second. Okay, we'll give Mr. Smith a second. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you. Good night.